Welcome to SEPSA Talk. I am Evan Sapia Kisi, the host of SEPSA Talk. SEPSA is Center for Better Society Advocacy and Research Africa. SEPSA Africa is a non-profit organization that believes in a better society for all. We in SEPSA Africa believe that a better society begins with you and I. Hashtag, a better society begins with me. For more information, please log on to www.sepsaafrica.org. Please follow us on the various social media platforms: YouTube, SEPSA Talk, Facebook at SEPSA Africa, Instagram, SEPSA Africa, and Twitter at SEPSA Africa. Like always, today, we bring you another interesting discussion on the topic State Security versus Citizens, Crowd Control, and Brutalities. We have seen in the last few days or months that State Security Service has been in the news, amongst other things, concerning inability with regard to crowd control, brutalities, and assault on citizens and the likes. And in this episode of SEPSA Talk, we focus on brutalities by security services from a historical perspective and discuss why it appears very difficult to overcome this problem. And to help us deal with this important issue are Mr. Lord Edusei Akins. He's a regular panelist on SEPSA Talk. He's currently a doctoral researcher at the University of London School of Oriental and African Studies. His research focus lies in international development policy and biosecurity. He holds Master of Science from Stockholm University, Sweden, and the Master of Science from Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, Sweden, and Bachelor of Science from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Ghana. I must say it's always a pleasure to host you. Welcome once again to SEPSA Talk, Mr. Lord Edusei Akins.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And our next guest, who is also a regular panelist, is Mrs. Akosua Jima. She is a consultant in healthcare and human rights, researcher and a writer. She lives in Ontario, Canada. She was Master of Social Work at Carleton University, Canada. She also holds MA in Human Geography and Resource Development at the Western University, London, Canada. She holds LLM in Diplomacy and International Law from the Lancaster University, England. She also holds BA in Human and Resources Development at the University of Ghana. Her expertise lies in general internal medicine, gerontology, substitute decisions in healthcare. Thank you, and it's always a pleasure to host you on SEPSA Talk. Welcome to SEPSA Talk, Akosua.
Pleasure. I'm very happy and honored to be here and to meet all these intelligent people. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last guest is Dr. Jones Opoku Ware. He is a criminologist and a crime researcher. He's a lecturer at the Institute of Distance Learning at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, Ghana. I must say it's a pleasure to host you for the very first time on SEPSA Talk. Welcome to SEPSA Talk, Dr. Jones Opoku Ware.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure joining you for discussion today.
Thank you very much. And I'm delighted that we've been able to put up this panel. And also I have to quickly mention that today we are doing something new. I would be Edmond Yeboah, who is also one of our panelists, and usually the producer of the show would be a co-host today. And so he would also be asking some of the questions and as well as the follow-up questions. I must also apologize to our fellow Sepsarians, those of you who follow us that we are a bit late due to a few technical issues. But we are streaming live, so tell a friend to tell another friend. And for those of you who have made time to join us via Zoom here, we are grateful. And don't forget to keep your questions coming. So thank you very much. And without wasting much time, I think I will immediately start with my questions. And I'd like to start with you, Lord. At least about 2-3 weeks ago, we had a discussion with you around the general security in Ghana, and you walked us through a number of things. We know that as part of the mandates of the security services is to protect law and order, or if you like, if people are going on demonstrations, they are also in a way supposed to protect properties and again law and order. So under what conditions would you describe protecting state security as a form of brutality? It would be nice for you if you could provide us some chronology and historical perspective of such instances. Under what condition can we say that in an attempt by the security service to protect law and state property, it has ended in a form of brutality?
Thank you very much. I'm happy to join this group and to discuss this very important topic, security, which is defined broadly as the absence of war or the presence of human development indicators, which is broadly defined as human security, or broadly referred to as human security, possibly referring to how people live their life comfortably in more stable and orderly manner. So that is broadly about security, the absence of war and the absence of problems afflicting mankind. But sometimes states that have monopoly over violence, or states that have one priority, which is about keeping the territorial integrity of their jurisdictions intact, resort to several tactics in order to achieve this result. States have several objectives. One of these key objectives include maintaining internal order and stability. By maintaining internal order and stability, states may use several security structures or several security institutions. Police is one, the military is one. We also have other paramilitary institutions, such as customs, the prisons. They are all part of the entire security architecture. When the state feels that something going on in the country threatens its interest, it may use one of these institutions to address the problem. By using one of these institutions, the rights of the citizens may be violated. And that is what you were referring to as brutalities. So one, the key priority of a state is to maintain internal order and to also prevent external aggression. And by doing that, states use force. Not only force, they use what is called soft power. Sometimes when the soft power doesn't work, they resort to the use of force. And by using this, resorting to the use of force, they may end up infringing on the human rights of the people. And if you look at the history of Ghana, since 1957, when we gained independence, the state has been using a lot of instruments that can be considered as violating the human right of the people. In 1958, Daniel Nkrumah government passed what is called the Prevention Detection Act, PDA. That act was purely to fight Nkrumah's enemies, and it was used broadly and widely to sort of harass citizens, harass opponents, harass people that were disagreeing with the government. So by maintaining the internal order, and the reason why Nkrumah resorted to PDA was also because the opposition were very adamant in trying to kill him. There were more than 4 attempted assassinations attempt on Nkrumah's life. So Nkrumah also felt that there was the need to maintain law and order in the country. And by maintaining law and order in the country, there was a legislation, and that legislation was used widely in arresting people and putting them in jail without trial. So that is one aspect. When Nkrumah's government came to an end, the government that took over, the military government, also resorted to the use of violence as a way of maintaining law and order. A lot of people who were aligned with the Nkrumah's government were arrested. Some of them were dispossessed of their economic resources. Others were put in jail. Others went on exile. So that was also what happened under the NLC. The NRC, the National Liberation Council, the NLC, which was headed by Ankara and later on Afrifa. But what they were trying to do was that after they had taken power, they feared that there could be a counter coup. And as you may be aware, in 1967, there was a counter coup. Therefore, the regime felt threatened and therefore resorted to certain tactics, which could be considered as violation of human rights. When the NLC went or handed in power to the Busia government, which was democratic, also used both some security means sort of to control the internal politics of the country. That also resulted in certain violation of human rights. As you may be aware, Busia said, no court, referring to the fact that the court can make decision, but the ultimate decision rests with the government. So Busia's government also, in a minor sense, was involved in some violation of human rights. All this in the name of security. When Busia's government was overthrown by a Champon also, as a military regime, violated human rights. But I would say that from a Champon's regime and 1979, when Rawlings came into being, the problems of Ghana's internal security was not too much. The human rights violation wasn't too much until 1979, when Rawlings' regime came to power. In fact, NLC didn't go on a rampage of killing its opponents. Busia didn't go on that attempt either. A Champon didn't arrest its opponent and start killing them. It was under 1979 Rawlings regime, the AFRC, that the killing of key political figures came into being. So if you remember, a Champon was killed, Akufu, FWK, Akufu was killed, several key military officers, and that happened. Then Rawlings handed over to Liman, and then Liman also ruled for nearly 2 years, and Rawlings came back in 1981. From 1981 to 1989, we can say that there was extreme use of violence against the citizenry in the name of security. When Rawlings took over in 1981, between 1981 and 1985, for instance, a lot of journalists were arrested. As you may be aware, Kwesi Pratt was arrested, Kweku Baakun was also arrested, but they were eventually released. Journalists were arrested, politicians were arrested, chiefs were arrested. I mean, there was not a single sector of the Ghanaian society that was not touched. But all this was to help the regime to maintain law and order and security. So by maintaining law and order and security in the country, the regime resorted to certain tactics, including the arrest and detention of its opponents. Apart from journalists, trade unionists were also arrested. One trade unionist whose story is captured in several documents is one guy called Ahmed Pobi. Ahmed Pobi was a cocoa marketing, a member of the cocoa marketing board and the union that surrounds cocoa production in the country. He was picked up. He was sent to, 3 of them were sent to Gonda Barracks. One guy was tortured and he died there. And then this Ahmed Pobi had his manhood, a soldier jumped and stamped on his manhood and he collapsed and died. So that tells you the extent of the violence that the citizens endured under the under Rawlings' second coming. You may also be aware that 3 judges were also killed.
Yeah.
These are all part of the attempt by the security or the state to maintain law, order, and a functioning government. From there, from 1980, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, things were very bad for ordinary Ghanaians. If you remember, there were what is called the CDR, the Committee for West. There were a lot of paramilitary organizations under the PNDC, and they carried out a lot of human rights violations in the name of the regime. But luckily for Ghana, internal pressure and external pressure forced Rawlings to hand over power in to transition from an authoritarian system of government to a democracy. So in 1992, 93, Ghana became a democracy. But that culture of military violation of human rights in the name of security and order hasn't gone away. And that is what we have been seeing in even our elections, where the military is deployed, where the police are also deployed, where paramilitary organizations in the name of the state are also deployed to maintain law and order. And by so doing, they end up violating the human rights of some of the citizens. And therefore, what we saw recently in Ejura and also in Wa are not cases of isolated cases. They form part of what I have just described from 1957 all the way to 1980s and then now. So there is this understanding of the state trying to maintain law and order. The understanding is that by maintaining law and order, force can be used, but using force can also be interpreted as violating human rights. So I will end here. If
Sure. Just a quick follow-up question, and maybe I'll see if Edmond would also like to ask anything. So thank you very much for the historical perspective or the historical happenings that you've given us here. But my follow-up question is, so is it the case that we cannot in any way assume that the state security have indulged in a brutality or any form of violence? Because if I understood you very well, they are allowed to use either soft or force power. So at what instance are we justified to say that what they, for example, just the recent happenings, the current ones, without going back to history, the use of military to torment opponents and the likes. So at what point can we say that the actions of the military or the actions of the police or any of these security agencies is has resulted in some form of brutality, or is a violence that has been meted out to citizens? Briefly.
I would say that all those things that I described, they are not legal in the right sense. What they did to, let's say, John Kublenu, or Tommy Thompson. There was a newspaper in Ghana called Free Press, the Free Press. It used to be the publisher of the Free Press was called Tommy Thompson, and one of its editors was called John Kublenu. These two guys were arrested by the military for publishing editorials that the regime considered critical. So these people haven't committed any crime, but the regime interpreted their actions as a threat to itself, and therefore went against them, went to arrest them. So that is, the regime hasn't got any right to do what they did.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And in an environment where laws are respected, those people whose rights were violated could take the government to court for violating their rights. So my point, what I've said so far is that the regime or the regimes were trying to secure themselves in power. And by securing themselves in power, they resorted to certain tactics that lawyers can argue were in violation of the human rights. But, and if you look at what all those that I talked about, it is a mixture of democratic and military regimes. So if you have a democratic regime that is also behaving like a military, then it's a major problem. Brutalities against citizens are totally wrong, no matter how the regime tried to justify it. No matter what, whether it is a democratic government or a military government, brutalities against civilians, especially unarmed civilians, totally. Okay. And therefore, citizens have right to pursue the government in court if they feel that their rights have been violated. Yes.
Thank you very much, Lord.
So I have a follow-up question, because you made mention that soft and also sometimes it could be violent. So let's say it's accepted to some extent, but this is where the gray line is. To what extent is it reasonable force, and to what extent is it excessive force? Because I do know that there is a legal sort of allowance for military or the security in general to use force. And so they always go to the defense that they were acting within this legal allowance. So my question is, to what extent do we call it outright brutality, or they being in their confines to keep law and order?
If you don't mind, we could direct this question to Dr. Opokuware. I guess that so that we can spread that. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you very much. I think I agree to a larger extent the commentary and the rendition that the Lord has given, and it's very detailed. And as he made it clear, you could still see remnants of those traits, these military traits, still lurking around in the shadows, even in a democratic system as we operate. That is why, for instance, in crowd control, you still see some of these atrocities and brutalities that are meted out to people. And as you eloquently asked, there are justifications that some people have used as a means to prove and to justify why those brutalities are meted out to, especially protesters or people who are demonstrating. And now, it becomes illegal to a larger extent when these people are unarmed. When everything shows that these are peaceful protesters or peaceful demonstrators, just venting out whatever grievances they have and they want to draw authorities' attention to. And then such violence are visited on them merely because some rogue soldier or soldiers and police people feel that by the people being on the streets and making loud noise and cheering, they are actually making a certain government unpopular. And so the best way is to be able to visit such kind of violence on them in the name that some form of minimum, force was used to quell people who they feel like, they were going out of bounds. And for me, that is where the problem is. The problem arises when such people are not armed. But yet, some people decide to visit such kind of violence on them. And for me, this is what we have been seeing over the period, where you see that people who go out to, to demonstrate and also to vent out their spleen on whatever issue that bothers them are actually, subjected to such kind of treatment. And so for me, nothing can really justify it, especially when those people are unarmed and they are only trying to express themselves and to express their frustration or opinion about an issue that they want to draw the government attention to, irrespective of how the police or whoever try to explain them out.
Okay. So then I have a question. My question would be, is violence the only language to keep law and order? Because it seems like in Ghana, that's the only thing we see. So if you can help and educate our audience, what are the other ways that they could use without not resorting to violence?
Yes, definitely. It is not about violence alone. But you see, let me tell you something. I mean, studying a little bit about our police and our military, they derive a certain mentality from the society that many of us are not people we can really talk to be able to convince at a particular point in time. And that the language we actually understand is the use of force. You see, and it derives even from our education system and how many of us are even raised. Okay, where in schools, even our teachers think that, look, the best way for us to conform is to visit punishment. And here I'm talking about negative punishment on us. This is the kind of, behavior that creeps into our lives right from our very foundation and then permeates into other institutions of state. So it is a kind of mentality that has been built over the period, okay, and has found itself in most of these security agencies and other state institutions that are even supposed to maintain law and order. Mm-hmm. So the issue is that, look, these guys, they are not people you have to talk to. That is why when a policeman comes to you and even arrests you, the first thing they do is to give you a dirty slap. Because their idea is that for you to conform, they must first visit violence on you to get you into submission. And so in a crowd form, okay, in a mob form, where there are large numbers of people, they think that using the repressive state apparatus, and trying to visit, maximum violence on people to cow them into submission is the only way for you for these people to calm down. Nothing else will stop them. So it is a certain mentality that have been built over a period. And so it is the reason why we continually see some of these casualties in most of the things that we see. So for me, that is where the issue. Meanwhile, these are not the only ways you can actually achieve conformity. You can actually go into a lot of negotiations. Okay, for instance, if I should look at what happened in Nigeria, okay, though it was very spontaneous and the kind of demonstration and protest that happened there didn't seem to have leaders, okay, you could still have identified certain people within the community and then negotiate with those people. And then on the basis of that negotiation, you could have achieved a certain minimum level of conformity and a certain level of agreement. That wasn't done. So if you look at the operational processes that resulted in what happened in Nigeria, based on the testimonies of the regional minister and the security people, you could see that even before these guys were called in to come, okay, and maintain whatever, law and order over there, there was a certain perception that these guys are very violent because, when you do a lot of criminological analysis of crimes and when you do the hotspot mappings, Nigeria is always seen as one of the hotspots in terms of violent behavior of people and all that. So coming from that kind of background, the command that was given to the military and the police was, look, go and subdue these kind of people. And you could see from the actions and the behavior of the military people who went to police such kind of demonstration in Nigeria, the kind of pusher they went in and the kind of force they exerted. And that is why we have this kind of casualties that we had. And it is, as I said, it normally comes from the kind of psyche that we've built over the period about how to control the typical Ghanaian, especially because people think that the only language that Ghanaians understand is to exert punishment and inflict pain on them. So it is something that is still haunting our security agencies. And for them, I mean, it's going to continue until we begin to work on their psychology.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Pokwari. I'll come to you, Akosia, and of course, I'll allow you, Edmond, to also ask something, but just a quick follow-up, because you said some fundamental things. First, about the fact that usually the only language most Ghanaians do understand is the use of force. And you also mentioned something about the history of Ejura being one of the hotspots. And I think there's also findings around that they are known to be to often attack the police station and the likes. And so my question is, then is it not justified that right from the beginning, knowing what it's on the ground, knowing what we know in research findings or whatever, what the security services did was absolutely the right thing, because these people could have in the end overpowered these police people if, let's say, military reinforcement was not even called for it. And so if we know all these things, then absolutely there was nothing wrong with how the security services acted, because their lives were also equally in danger. You talked about it being totally unacceptable if the people are unarmed. This is not something we can tell. They also reported that some of the people in the crowd had guns, and even they fired some guns. So is it fair to say that then the security services had every right to do whatever that they did?
Well, I mean, if you are to look at the actions of the military in particular, I mean, this morning I was on another program and I made it clear that based on the kind of information I know went to the authorities in the military for them to dispatch the soldiers there, I feel that they only came to act based on the instructions that they were given. Okay, and now look, when we are to engage the military in civil engagements or civil, processes as we have it in Nigeria, you should always know that there is a tendency to have excesses. Okay, because you see, the word, for instance, reinforcement means differently to the police and also to the military. And as a barracks boy and as a son of a soldier, I understand this too well. That when you tell the police to have reinforcement, it means different to them. It's something different to them. And when you tell a military man to come for reinforcement, it also means something different. And now when you tell a military man that they should proceed to reinforce a certain action that is happening, what we are essentially telling them is that you have been overpowered by whatever threat that exists. And therefore, they are supposed to come with the full armor of the state to come and deal and quell that kind of threats. So I tell people that, look, in cases where the military are involved and are called for reinforcement, you should first know that, look, these are guys who are not coming to resolve, but coming to assault. Okay, so once the command went to them, and based on the analysis I've said, the perception that people have about Ejura and the kind of things we know in terms of criminal behavior analysis that we know about that area. Look, once the command went to them, now this is the scenario. Trust me, the military are going to come in their full force, and that is exactly what they came to do. So on that basis, I will not for them too much. But you see, it also tells us something about the kind of law enforcement we are subjected to in this country. You see, in policing, there is something we call the guardian and the warrior approach to policing. Okay, and now every police institution across the world operates with this principle, the guardian and warrior approach. The guardian approach basically means that every police institution may consider a community or a group of people as people that needs to be protected. So our job here as policemen is to protect life and property. Or they can adopt what we call the warrior posture, where they see members of society as enemies, and therefore they are people that we have to fight. Okay, so in every civil engagement, what the police have to do is to operate within these two principles. Does the scenario that was playing out in Ejura warrant that the police adopt a warrior approach or they adopt a guardian approach? And if they adopt a guardian approach, that means that they were going to Ejura with the mindset that we are there to protect life and property. And if they went there as with a warrior mindset, then they are going there, as it were, to see and to deal with so-called criminals and therefore take them out. And you can see that based on whatever has transpired, and all of us have seen, the military and the police people who went there actually went there with a warrior mindset. The warrior mindset emanating from the fact that, look, this community, we have known them to be very violent, and they are therefore criminals. So let's use whatever apparatus we have in our disposal, go and crash them, and for once, maintain law and order permanently. And that is exactly what we've seen. So until we are able to refine the way the policing system and the police actually engage the community, okay, and emphasize more on the guardian role of the police service and the security agencies, I'm telling you that because of the fact that they think that the language the typical Ghanaian understand is violence, and the typical Ghanaian understand is using force, they are always going to have this warrior mentality and in dealing with the citizens and community members. And if you are not careful, we are always going to have these kind of casualties we are having.
Thank you very much, Dr. Opoku-Ware. Edmond. Well, I think
we can move on to Akosia for now.
All right, great. So at this point, we'll bring in Akosia. Akosia, I know you've been wanting also to speak as well. Now, so if you listen to Lord and you listen to Dr. Opoku-Ware, it appears that it's not a simple matter. It's not something you can easily say that the security services, acted illegally or they acted legally. We've seen some of the reasons that could be said to be a legal action or an illegal action. But Lord said something in his submission that usually the security services comprises a bit of a few of the sections. And in some cases, when the police are supposed to act, we find out that military services are called on as a form of reinforcement. I mean, Dr. Opoku-Ware just talked about what a reinforcement means to the military service when they are asked to be part of these things. But what's your take on this frequent reinforcement of the military service? We've been seeing this in the past few years during elections in Parliament House. What's your take on that? And is it not also kind of a way to institutionalize some of these brutalities that are meant to citizens? Do you think that it's necessary to be calling on the military as a reinforcement? Can't we use additional police? What's your take on that?
Thank you for the question. I was gonna just look up for a name of an organization. Can you hear me okay? Okay, thank you. I think I'd like to say thank you to these two intelligent people for providing those backgrounds and insights. You asked about what do I think about the reinforcement. I would start off by saying that the policing system or the policing model that Ghana uses is the colonial model, all right? And a lot talked about 1950s, but I would like to go backwards and actually say it actually even started way before. And this type of policing system was initiated by the colonialists in 1830. And at that time, the policing system that they established by the Portuguese was to protect the trade ports, like the Elmina Castle and those things. So the purpose was not to protect the people, it was to protect the colonial interest. It actually got reinforced also around 1870s, I believe. And actually, in 1873, when the Ashantis were resistant to colonial rule, I think the British actually went to Nigeria and brought in Northern Hausa people. They brought in about 700 of them. Prior to that, there were just about, when they started to formalize the policing system, I believe they started to formalize it around 18, I have to check the date again just for a second, just to be accurate
And
there.
and
So,
please speak up a bit for us as you.
oh, sorry.
All right,
So
thank you.
can you hear me? Is it louder?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So in 1871, there were about 90 police force. The police force, that time the British put police force together. There were just 90 people that were policing. And regardless of whether that was the British or that was the Portuguese, the purpose was to protect colonial interests, trade ports, trade routes, railways, castles. That was the purpose of the police at that time. So essentially, the colonialists recruited people to do policing for the purposes of protecting the colonial people so they can exploit the people. Prior to the British, we had our own policing system that actually protected private property, especially the Ashantis had it to protect and also to punish criminals like thieves and stuff like that. When the British came, they formalized the police and then they sort of established it so they can actually protect their interests. As I mentioned before, in 1873, when the people resisted, the British brought in 700 houses from northern Nigeria to, and I think I learned that is where the word "buga buga" came from, because that meant they beat people. So that was the tactic that the British used. And so this went on and on and on. And anytime the people really resisted anything, the British would bring in reinforcement to punish the people just so they can continue to exploit us. This policing system in around independence, as Lord said, I'm not going to repeat it, were incorporated. These same people, including the houses that the British brought to punish our people. And why do you think they brought those? They brought these men because they thought they could beat up our people to keep them under control. In order not to waste time, if anybody would take the interest to go to the Ghana Police website and see what their mission and vision is. If you look at it, and I will look at it for a moment, their purposes are not to protect the citizens, okay? It is not to protect citizens' interests. If you go to their website, they say their functions are crime prevention and detection, apprehension and prosecution of offenders, maintenance of law and order, protection of life and property. And if you look at their mandate meaning what the law allows them, the powers the law allows them to do, it says to protect and preserve the internal security of the country through law enforcement. If you look at their mission, it says almost the same thing, to ensure crime prevention and detection, apprehension, prosecution, and their core values are actually guided by these the principles that actually set them up, that gives them the mandate. So essentially, you don't see any human rights there, okay? So that means, just starting from the point I started from, the mission of the Guinean police is not really to protect the interests of the public in that manner as we're looking at it now. And mind you, I'm not saying I support it. I'm just telling what is there. And as to why the mentality of the police is. So essentially, this is their core values. This is their mission. These are their goals. And it's still on their website. They also refer to an act 830, I think, that was established in 1950. I think that is what the Police Act is, way back to 1950. And that was during, if you refer it back to what Lord was describing in great detail, that is where it's from. And that particular act was in process when Dr. Kwame Nkrumah used to brutalize the people and suppress the opposition. So essentially, post-independence, the government actually implemented what the British were using to suppress their own people to actually apply the same thing. And not only that, they used those models to establish the police force. And some of those same people that were actually serving the colonialists were incorporated. And not only that, during the process of developing this act, I believe in the same process, many of those people apparently the majority of those people that were in the police force were part of the people that overthrew Kwame Nkrumah. And so apparently the next government, the National Liberation Council, apparently 50% of those that instigated and participated in the coup were from the police force. So this is how integral the police and the military have been a part of the politics of Ghana. So essentially colonial model, participating in it, and actually they're almost like a function or an arm or an apparatus of the government. So if you want to know why it is like that, it is the same process. And the act, as they were working on it, the government of Nkrumah got, and mind you, prior to 1966, when Dr. Nkrumah was deposed, 1964, apparently there was another attempt on him, and that was a police officer. Okay, and so that wasn't successful. And then in 1966, they participated, as I already mentioned. And then the people that actually developed the act on which the police are acting on right now, the 1950 Act, the majority of them were the same people. The people in the Revolutionary Council, whatever, that same act. And so they didn't make any major changes. And then the same act is up to today. I believe they made a few amendments, but they essentially the thing that is governing the police work is the act of from that time. Police made it, police overthrew the government, police participated, and they developed that act. And mind you, as I said, when you go to their website, it's the same thing they're doing. It's crime prevention, protection of government. So the police are in bed with the government. Even if you talk about the appointment, if you forget about the appointment, just now the appointment. And if you also look at the structure of the policing system right now, if you also would go back and look at it, and even look at the Constitution, I believe the Constitution lays out the police. Then I think if you're looking at the amendment part of it, you would be looking at page 200, I think. Sorry, page 100. I'll have to refer just so people can get it to refer to it. If you look at the page 100, and I believe Articles 200 and on, I believe, it talks about what the police is supposed to be doing. And if you, I'm gonna just go for it for a second, besides the act, and just so people get the right thing. Chapter 15 of their constitution, if you're looking at the 1996 version, which is the updated, you would see that the police, their structure is laid out. They have the police council, and if you look at it, who is made up of that? First of all, the chairman would be appointed by the president in consultation with the members of the Council of State, the minister responsible for internal affairs, in other words, the Ministry of Interior, who could have been appointed by the president. And then you would find the Inspector General of Police. So the council is police officers, and the lawyer who is a representative of the police, and the attorney general, and so it goes on and on and on. So even the public citizen thing that is actually governing the police is all made up of the police and people in government. That the head of the police is appointed by the president, and then they control the police and the direction of it. So if you're talking about, just to answer your question, simple, to talk about why are they asking for reinforcement? It is the simple answer is the same model the British used, or the colonialists from the Portuguese or the British, as well as their successive governments. And then it's the same model they're using, and it's the same law they're using. And I was trying to remember a human rights organization's name as we talk. If I remember that, I will put it out. I think I have it here. It is an organization that is set up by the Commonwealth to look at whether the policing system or the Commonwealth countries are actually policing in consistence with modern democracy. What they concluded was that the Guinean police force, I think they produced a report, which I can also share or make it available or refer people to access that on the internet as well. It says that the report was produced in 2007. It says that the Guinean police has not been brought up to speed with modern democracy. And actually, this, again, it's established by the Commonwealth, which is overseen by the British. And I'm pretty sure the report could have been sponsored by them as well. And even they say that the Ghana police is a colonial model, is still based on the colonial tactic. that they use to suppress our own people and oppress our own people. So the same method is there, and the same, it's sort of built there into it. So I think the government, successive government, and if you look at US State Department reports on the policing system, on human rights, on how police interact with journalists, with the public, with everybody, you could see that year after year after year. And I know people are upset, but if you look at the report, you can search it 10 years back and it's the same thing government after government uses. It's not really, the names of the victims may differ, the names of the officers may differ, the name of the government in power may differ, but it's the same, similar reports, people being brutalized in the same way. So I think it's just the system and the structures that have not been modernized. And apparently they were supposed to, there was a report that was produced in, since 1996, I think they managed to do one committee report, but even that they haven't implemented their recommendations. So again, they haven't really reformed it. Just the simple answer is we are practicing a colonial, almost like an old, so we haven't really incorporated it into a modern democracy, because prior we were sort of practicing the same colonial model of government and practice and treating our people. And now that we're in that modern democracy, we have not brought it up to speed to incorporate it, as the Constitution is actually also respecting certain rights, such as the right to assembly, the right to life, which is and deprivation of life, those kinds of things that I think that I mean, if there's another opportunity, then I can explain that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Akusia. Edmond, I don't know whether you have any follow-up question too.
No, my follow-up question kind of ties into the next question that
All
we
right.
have, so.
All right. Then what I would do is that I will read some few messages. I would just involve I call them fellow Subsyrians from Facebook, and then I would just try and read all of them. There are some questions that are a bit directed to some specific people of our guests, but please, all of you, feel free to have a bite on it later on. So one from AK Mensa, dear Dr. Jones, under what circumstances does the police or military employ either the guardian or the warrior roles? Please, Dr. Pokuware, come again. Under what circumstances should reinforcement be called? Dr. Poku again, please, can you explain why should the military personnel shoot at civilians? And the rules of engagement, under no circumstances a security forces engage without going through the escalating processes. The same person says, well, that's, can I have your email? We will talk about that later. Akusia, the function of the police is not to protect the people or citizens, with a question mark. What then are their mandates? What's the usefulness of the police or state security when it is not to protect the people? Then please, clearly Dr. Poku has done any research with regards to show ROE works, please. Anyway, so basically a few of the questions here, I think mainly bordering on the role of the military. I mean, one question that I would have also asked is, under what circumstances or conditions should a reinforcement be called, whether it's the police or the military? And the basic question to you, Akosia, about whether the role of the police is not to protect citizens, I think that sounded a bit controversial, I guess. Maybe if you would want to respond to that. I start with you, Dr. Pokuware.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for the question. I mean, personally, I have spoken many times against, the militarization, or let me say militarism of civil engagement when it comes to law enforcement. Okay. I personally think that the politicians that we've had over the years have used this military reinforcement to cover up the real problems that confront the Ghana Police Service in terms of training and retooling the service to be able to perform in a modern democracy. Okay, so the issue, as we've all talked about, is that, look, instead of investing time and resources, in training them, especially in issues such as crowd control, and also doing research on crowd behavior and gathering intelligence, especially when there are certain issues that people want to gather around. They think that, look, why don't we just allow them to do whatever they do? But if there is a problem, we call the military to come and disperse them. Okay, so for me, I have never been in favor of this militarization of policing and all those kind of things, where, you know, we have to rather bring in the military to come and deal with them. Because you see, the military, by their rules of engagement, are different from, you know, the police. The way the military are configured, the architecture, is that they are not supposed to really interact with civilians like the way we have come to see. And even if you go to other advanced countries like the US, you realize that you have limited presence of even the military in towns and in cities. Okay, and now you only see these guys when you have to see them, especially when, for instance, they are going to a grocery shop and they don't even carry arms on them. Okay, but we, on the contrary, seems to want to bring the military in every least opportunity. And as I said earlier on, it is coming from a certain mindset. And I think Akuzia has given us a very good background, especially because of the model that they operate with, I mean, since time immemorial. And also because of the mindset that have developed and have crept into our security services concerning how, you know, how to make Ghanaians conform and how to maintain law and order. Okay, so for me, that is the reason why we have the kind of situation we have, where the military is always called in to come. But personally, when we are dealing with the civilians, in terms of civil engagement, I believe that we must go in for the best approach, which is to be able to train our police to handle civil engagement, in terms of even crowd, with those kind of de-escalation strategies. When they are supposed to deal with crowd, they are supposed to be trained with that. So for me, that is where I see this whole dynamic. So personally, I am not someone who is always in for reinforcement of the military. I think that it is a practice that we have to seize if actually we are supposed to flourish very well and to strengthen our democracy.
We'll
Okay,
definitely.
so then
Thank
I
you
have
very
a
much.
question.
Sure, we'll definitely come to that. Edmond, all right, Edmond, go ahead.
Yeah, so then my question to Dr. Opokuwari would be, is there not a manifestation of the inadequacy of the police to control crowd? Why they bring in the military? So it would be, do they have the proper training? Do they have the proper infrastructure? I mean, we see from the television how other countries control crowd with all the gadgets and with all the infrastructure. I'm just wondering if our police do have that. If they don't have, then they don't feel like putting themselves on the line. So the easier way is to call for people who can get the job done faster. Would that be a reason why our police system always resort to the military in combating or in dealing with?
So you can, great. So a very good question. So you could see your question actually tallies in with my point that it is always a shortcut and an easy way that the politicians use to avoid investing within the police service. Okay, because you see, they know very well that taking that route in terms of, you know, retooling them and training them to be able to handle crowd behavior is something that will demand a lot of investment. And many of them don't want to do that. They just want to have a certain force. Because you see, sometimes when you see the way the police operate in the country, you just see that, look, some people are just paid to wear uniforms. They are not really doing any serious policing. And the politicians, those things help them. Okay, it helps them because they know that, look, these people, we only have to just provide them with a minimum. They are not really doing anything, you know, in terms of the job that they are supposed to do. So it is basically an issue of the politicians choosing the easy way out. Okay, instead of investing so much in such systems where the police can be well trained, where they can be retooled to be able to handle, for instance, crowd. Okay, they will not do it because they know that, look, once there's an issue, we can easily call just exert certain violence on people and then quell it. But you see, there's something that many people don't know. For instance, when it comes to crowd, okay, or gatherings in themselves or crowds in themselves are not entities. It's actually a process, okay? It's a process that has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. And if you see the way our police and our military people operate, they always look at the end, which is that let's come in and disperse the crowd that has congregated and the kind of noise they are making and whatever violence they think those people are engaging in. That is the end game. But you see, in being able to manage crowd, you must look at the beginning. How were they able to even congregate? And now when they congregate, within that period that they've congregated, what interaction goes on? And now it is only when you are able to look at the beginning and the middle and avoid focusing so much on the end, which is the dispersion of the crowd, that you'll be able to use other de-escalation tactics to be able to stop, these demonstrations and protests from getting out of hand. Because you see, before people meet and assemble, messages go around, okay? Networking goes around, other things goes around. It is based on those information that they get, that they assemble, and that will determine what will happen on the assembly ground before even the military are called or the police are called to come and disperse them. So we will realize that most of the times, because of the kind of training, the minimal training that they have, and the kind of systems that we don't have for the policing, they are always looking at the end game of crowd, which is that let's come in and come and disperse them. Let's come in and come and scatter them. Whatever means we have to use, let's get these guys from congregating. And you see, that is why always there's casualties. So in a sense, when the security agencies come, instead of their presence being deterrent enough from people engaging in violence, rather their presence rather incites people to violence. And that is why most of the time, immediately you see the police coming out in demonstrations and the military coming out, people get agitated and then they begin to confront them.
All right.
So
Thank
I
you
have
very
a
much.
question.
We would actually, yeah,
Direct.
we would actually come to that. Sorry, Edmond. Would actually come to how to, because you also mentioned things around the best approaches to deal with some of these crowds, or to put it in a simple way, crowd control, and also how citizens are supposed to behave during demonstrations and protests. I mean, this would have during the final round, and I think Edmond would lead that. But just for Akosia to also answer one of the questions that she was asked, and then maybe a minute or two for Lord to sum up some of the things that we've said so far before we move to the very final round, where we would look at the best approach to deal with some of these happenings. Thank you. Akosia.
Thank you. I think the person was asking that I said, I actually read verbatim from the police website. I didn't make it up, right? So they stated that is what they do. So I'm actually painting a picture. If you're wondering what model they're operating with, what the mindset they're, where it is, right? So what is their function? Their function is to protect property, catch the criminal. So that's why I said it's the same colonial regime. It's a colonial model they're still using. And I'm not justifying anything. I'm just saying it is the model. It's the modus operandi they're using, and they haven't changed it. And I said that's what the colonialists started to suppress the people, and the aims of setting up the police in the first place by the colonial people was not to protect the people. It was to protect their property, their exploitation, the gold they were stealing, everything they were doing, the castles, to be able to do the slavery. So they had to silence the people by having our police. And if you look at most colonial countries, that's what happened, okay? And so it's no different. The problem is and even in Canada and the USA, British did that to the natives and everywhere. The problem is the Americans, when they did their independence, that's when they incorporated human rights into it. Our human rights, we only incorporated with the 1992 Constitution, which says the right to life, the right to gather, like the right to assembly, the right to human dignity. And that is where they're supposed to bring the modern police into it. And I would say that quickly, compared to what I read about the Guinean police. Look at what Ontario, where I live, now what their police or their function is. Their function is, and I'll quickly go through it. If you look at Ontario, their function here is, just a second. In New South Wales, like one of those other colonials in Australia. Australia was also another colonial thing. And when the British left, they have updated their police system, and their police act is from 1990. And what they say the role of the police is they would uphold integrity above all, uphold the rule of law, preserve the rights and freedom of individuals, to seek to improve quality of life by community involvement in policing. They strive for citizen and police and personal satisfaction. And so they capitalize on the wealth of human resources, make efficient and economical use of public resources, ensure that authority is exercised responsibly. And in Ontario, where I live, also the act is from 1990, and we were also colonized by the British. And this is what Ontario is saying. The need, police, the need to ensure the safety and security of all persons and property in Ontario, the importance of safeguarding the fundamental rights guaranteed by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and Human Rights Code, the need for cooperation between the providers of police and services and the communities they serve, the importance of respect for victims of crimes and understanding of their needs, the need for sensitivity to pluralistic, multiracial, and multi-character of the Ontario society, the need to ensure that the police forces are representative of the communities they serve. So compare that with what the Guinean police says. It goes on to say preservation of internal security, so and protection of property, so to maintain calm, law and order. So it's the brute force, right? So you could see the two models. Essentially, all I'm saying, for whoever asked the question, I thank them for it. It's a good question, but I'm just saying, if you go to the police website, and it's still there, I was actually ashamed that they have democracy, but they have not actually incorporated what the Constitution in chapter, I believe chapter 5 is actually saying. So I think the reason is, they said, why has the model not changed? Because the political people have not changed the law. The political people, not only have they not changed the law, but they have also not done the training to change the mindset of the police, as Dr. Poco has already articulated. You know what I mean? So that's a simple question.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Akosia. Lord.
Yes, I would just want to add this. Why do we always send soldiers to control crowd? There are several reasons, and I respect the views expressed by Dr. Opokuari. But we have to also understand that Ghana is coming from a certain development perspective, and that development perspective is that we don't have enough police officers. And if you don't have enough police officers, when you have a problem, what do? As you may be aware, the United Nations has a benchmark for the police-civilian ratio. Every country must have a certain number of police to be able to control or maintain law and order in that society. Ghana hasn't got enough. By the United Nations numbers, it should be 500 people to one police officer. In Ghana right now, it is 848 to one, 848 people to one police officer. That tells us that the police officers that we have in Ghana don't have, they are too much overburdened by the work that they do. So when you have fewer police numbers and you have problems, then you really have to resort to certain measures. And that is one of the reasons why the government has been resorting to the use of the military. We don't have police officers. Look, the 275 parliamentarians that we have in Ghana, there is this argument that we should provide each of them with a police officer protection. The president is protected. The ministers are protected. So if you look at that, these people individually, we are assigning to them certain number of police, the police population that we have. Part of it is diverted to policing these politicians. So if you take up, say, we have about, say, 300 politicians, each of them having a police officer, the police numbers will definitely come down. So if you distribute the remaining police officers to the rest of the population, you can imagine, you can see that there isn't enough, and that is the reason why. So sometimes when there's problem in Accra, they will bring police officers from Kumasi to come and join. so that they'll be able to control the situation in Accra. Look at what since 1994, when there's this violence and land wars between the various groups in northern Ghana, the police have been present since then. We don't use police, we don't use the military in internal security situation. Mostly it is the police. But when you don't have adequate police numbers, when the police are not resourced to be able to deal with this problem, it's then that you begin to see the military. But like Dr. Opokuari said, the military, their training and their model of operation is totally different from how the police also operate. So when you send somebody whose duty it is to defend the territorial integrity of the country by preventing outside aggressors, the military is to prevent outside aggressors from harming Ghana. The police, they are to maintain law and order in the society. So when you bring someone who is supposed to maintain or prevent an outside aggressor to come and then use that same tactic to control people in the country, definitely you're going to have problems. The military don't understand anything apart from he's an enemy. Let us deal with him. All and right. by seeing the people as an enemy, there's no way they are going to avoid using guns and all that. One more issue that I would like to touch on. States must provide capacity for their security agencies.
All right, we would actually come to that as the last question. Sorry that I cut in. If you're just joining us live on Facebook, this is SEPSA Talk, and today we're looking at the topic state security versus citizens, crowd control, and brutalities. And this very last lap, which I would allow Edmond to take over, we will then zoom into how to deal with crowd control, how security services are able to deal with crowd control, what are the best approaches. But also we know citizens do have a duty or a role to play. How should citizens behave when they are in protest or they are in demonstrations? And for those of you who are also joining us via Zoom, I just wanted to mention that we would have the last 10 minutes or 5 minutes for you to ask your questions. So please don't forget, you can keep your questions coming. So Edmond, if you could take over now, thank you.
So thank you very much. I will direct my next question to Akosia. So it looks like from the chronology and the history that you've given us, are we right to say that Ghanaians have lost trust in the security apparatus? And if so, what are the consequences?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say they've lost trust, but I think there's a mistrust between them and the security officers because of the way they have sort of interacted over the years, right? So I don't think it's necessarily new. Maybe it is worsening, or people are more aware, or people have democracy now, so they can speak up some more. But I think that Ghanaians have actually suffered more brutalities in the past, and those that were old enough to witness 70s and 80s, they said it was brutal, right? Under military regimes, that was the worst part. Right now, it's more around isolated individuals getting brutalized, especially when they come into the ambit of the police officers or the military people. So in general, the manner in which the security officers interact with the public, it's almost as if they're there and we're here. And so then people are always defensive, as you can see. When they are here, you can easily approach a police officer because the thing is, mostly they're not confrontational with you because they may just check in and ask whether you're doing something, or they stop you. They may talk very calmly to you about please stay where you are and that kind of. If you're a criminal, though, they will be on the alert also. So I've always said, as I said last week, I've said to people, when an officer gives you a command, you need to listen and listen. And even like if you're doing, even in civilian training, I've done a couple of mass casualty training. I've also done some community collaborations with police and military police as well, just in collaboration to sort of work on some community projects. What the police have always said is, even if, let's say there's a shooter that came here and I'm not doing any wrong, they just came here, police came here to protect me. When you see the police move in the direction they're telling you, If they knock you down, you stay down because they may be saving your life. So that's the sort of thing, even with police and here, that's how they said they're training. They also said, anytime they're called, let's say there's a crisis and they're called in, the motive at that time, the immediate goal is to keep calm and control the situation. So they're not into individuals about, they hit me, they did this. They're not interested. They're supposed, because at that time, they know that somebody could be hiding in there, could be causing some mayhem. So their immediate goal is to keep it under control. So I always tell people when there's a crisis, police get there, you better listen or you may be dead. It doesn't matter. Because even here, they would tell us, you listen, if you see the police stopping and everybody moving in the opposite direction, don't try and get in. If the police say stay where you are, stay where you are. If they say show your hands, show your hands. Lay down, lay down. But again, my problem is, have the Guinean public been taught that? Because the Guineans are always talking back. Even when they come here, they do that. The police officers stop them. They were over speeding and they're talking back. Right? Rather than accepting and keeping calm, they're talking back always. Guineans, they do that here, right? So they don't understand. They feel like they always have to explain themselves. They always have to defend. So just to keep your question in perspective, you're saying, are they trusting? I think there's some mistrust because of the way policing have been done and the way the civilians and military, as well as the police, the way they treated the civilians, it's always top down. Right? It's like they're here, they have the power, and they use the power, the uniform, and the equipment to brutalize the people for the most part. So the people are also always on the defensive. So I think the model has to change, the mindset has to change. And as I mentioned earlier, they have to bring the policemen up to speed with modern democracy, the human rights, what the Constitution is actually saying. So the police, they have to be retrained. They need to be rewired about how to interact in order to build the trust. They also have to be stopping that in terms of barracks in the police, like they make them stay somewhere and the community stays somewhere, right? They need to be hiring police from the community themselves to build trust, right? So, anyway, I think I'm jumping the gun. So
sure. I mean, that was a really interesting point.
Yeah.
And
I
lead
think
me
you have
directly
to how to solve it, but yeah,
Dr.
but
Jones.
build trust. I think they need to do more to build the trust. But as long as their brutality keeps on going, I think the public is also always gonna see them and always be on the alert, whereby the police also see the public also don't like them. And the manner in which even the public talks about the police, I think it's very bad, right? Because they're reinforcing the fact that the police are bad. And so they're also always on the alert that the people have a bad mentality about them. Then the people have a bad mentality, the police are going to harm them. So it's a cyclical thing that I think there has to be a big sort of reconditioning of the mind, as well as retraining and holding the police accountable for brutalities done to the civilians.
Thank you very much, Akosia. So, Dr. Jones, we just heard Akosia talking about the cycle where it seems like the police have lost legitimacy in the face of the people, and the people have also lost trust in the face of the police. Moving forward, how do we build this police-public relationship? You are on mute. Can you please unmute yourself?
Okay, so sorry about that. Yeah, so I think going forward, I think Akosia made allusion to that. We have to do what we call community engagement. Okay, and I used to tell people that how many times I ask people, I mean, sometimes it comes out sarcastically, but I ask people, how many times have you been there and you just hear a knock on your door and you open and it's the Ghana Police Service people just even doing a welfare check? I mean, in Ghana, that would sound like something unheard of, okay? Because there is that kind of disconnect between the citizens or community members and the police. So generally, you see that almost every Ghanaian has a certain perception, you know, about the police and how they are supposed to relate to the police. And you could see that it emanates from this warrior approach to policing that we have been subjected to over the years, where the police have always seen themselves as, you know, custodians of the law, and that they are the ones that can fight whoever they have to fight, okay? As against coming down to the level of the citizens and even explaining things to us. or to the people or community members. So it is something that I think that going forward, we have to reform. We have to do more of community engagement. We have to let the citizens and the community members know the work of the police and why they are very important for us, you know, and why they have to be there for us. And it is only when we are able to build that kind of mutual engagement and community engagement that the police actually will have a lot more benefit from, even we, the community members. Because listen, the police can better do their job with the active involvement of community members. We are supposed to give them information. We are supposed to even use our localized community networks of ties, okay, to be able to help the police with information in terms of fighting crime, in terms of being able to protect lives and property. So if there is that disconnect between the community members and the police as an institution, then I'm afraid that whatever we want to do as a police service will not work. So I think that going forward, we have to do more. The police have to do more community engagement. They have to speak to they have to even do community visitations periodically. You know, let them see that, look, they are with us. And I think Akosia made a point about even the fact that the police are living in barracks. For me, if it is the military living in barracks, I'm okay. Okay, because by their configuration, they are not even supposed to interact so much with us. Okay, but the police, they must live within the community. Members must feel a part and parcel of them. Okay, in the same way, they must feel part and parcel of us. So it is only when the police and the community that will be able to, you know, fight some of these things. So I think that it all boils down to civil engagement, police, okay, so civil engagement. How are they engaging the citizens?
About civil engagement to be able to build this trust. But we know it's not the first time we are hearing about brutalities. We've heard about it in the past, and there have been committees set and there have been recommendations given. So I would like to put this question to Lord. What are some of the recommendations that have been given out of some of these committees? How have they been implemented? Do you think that these recommendations could end this brutality? Because this is where we all want to be. We all want to live in a country where the police will not see us as enemies, where they would not, if I may use the words of Dr. Jones, not come with this war mentality, but a guidance mentality, where violence is not the language. So I put it to Lord, what are some of the recommendations by the various committees that have been set up? And how do you think we can implement or use these recommendations to improve the situation?
Yeah, thank you for this question. There have been several recommendations from the various activities that have taken place all over the country. For instance, this violence that happened in Edra, the government has set up a committee. Definitely, the committee is going to come out with its own recommendations. If you go to Northern Ghana, Tamale, where there have been about 2,169 casualties since the violence erupted in that part of the country in 1994. Several committees have been set up, several recommendations, most of it dealing with police, civilian relations, dealing with socioeconomic development. Because mind you, societies where there's poverty, frustration, and all that, you tend to get people also committing more crime, people becoming more violent and all that. Because when people do not have access to basic necessities of life, they become very, very frustrated. And we know from frustration aggression theory that people tend to become violent when they get very frustrated. So part of the recommendation has been to improve upon the living conditions of the people. But we all know what is happening in Ghana, where people are finding it very difficult to make ends meet. So if you have that kind of development system in Ghana, then obviously you're going to have problem here and there. If you know the source of the problem in Nigeria, it was somebody talking about the development condition of the people. So that is the concept of development is critical here. The root cause of many of the problems that we tend to have in Africa, in Ghana particularly, is development rooted problems. We don't have water. therefore let's go on demonstration. So if people have water, would they go on demonstration? I don't think so. If people have access to hospitals, would they go on demonstration? I don't think so. So the part of this recommendation that you asked has been for the government and for various institutions to invest in the development of these communities so that people can access these public services, but they don't have it. If you look at northern Ghana, which is where we usually have some of this violent war here, it has been at northern Ghana or in northern Ghana that we always have problems with violence here and there. Part of it is that northern Ghana is the least developed part of Ghana. You go to western, upper west, upper east, northern region, they don't have better socio-economic resources. And therefore, what do people do? They have become frustrated. Either they move to the south or they stay there and become more poorer. So from development perspective, you cannot deal with security without looking at development. And that is why majority of experts are now talking about development-oriented security, whereby in communities you have, I like what my friend Dr. Jones said, that the police are supposed to do outreach programs, if you get to a house where there's an old lady there, you get to find out what is she doing, how is she surviving. Then the police will be able to take record. Okay, this lady living here hasn't got this thing. The police will be able to channel this to either the district chief executive or whoever is responsible for development in their community. This is how societies that have survived and that have improved upon the living conditions of people and have been able to reduce crime and conflict. This is how they have fought their way through. Go to the community, talk to the people. They are boys and girls in the community. What are they doing? What are their needs? Police can help the politicians and the chief executives and wherever with this kind of information so that they know that, okay, there are about 2,000 boys in this community. Only 10 of them are employed. So the 1,990 who are not employed, what are they doing? If we want to reduce conflict, violence, social vices in this community, then it is incumbent for us to invest A, B, C, D here. This is the kind of intelligence-leading information that can help society to even prevent violence from happening, let alone sending the police or soldiers to go and fight. But Ghana has been very, very, very lazy in terms of solving development problems. We have been very, very lazy. And in societies where politicians are lazy in pushing forward development policies and implementing development policies to bring people the needed socio-economic resources or services, then you have this violence. So for me, for Ghana to actually reduce the incident that we witnessed in Edura, for us to reduce it is not about sending soldiers. It is not about sending police. It is about investing in the communities. What road do they have? What hospital do they have? What kind of education do they have? How many Achimota or Presec do we have in the Northern region? So that if you want people to be taught and taught well, you need to put up proper educational structures. Then train teachers. How many teachers are in the northern part of Ghana? So it is development problem and not. But so when development fails, it is then that we begin to see security also becoming a challenge. But when development works, then you don't need even many police officers because people feel comfortable in their homes. The boys will not go out and steal, so there will be no police to go and then chase them out. So for me, we need these are the committee that you asked me. They have made recommendations of these things, but the politicians are very, very lazy, and they've always tried to have a shortcut whereby they do a little bit here, they do a little bit here, and they think that is not all. development is a systematic, pragmatic activity that you must do. And if you fail to do it, it shows itself in a form of insecurity. It shows itself in a form of instability. It shows itself in the form of citizens confronting police even when the police are helping them, because they begin to see the police as part of the state system that have made them poor or frustrated them. So then immediately they see police, they see them as part of the state system that is not working in their interest. So for me, development is critical. Provide them jobs, let water flow, let electricity. Then people begin to say, oh, this government is for us, or the state is taking care of us. If the state is taking care of me, why must I go and then confront the state? No, I will even rather help the state to do more. But when the state is not taking care of me and I'm struggling on my own, then I see the state and police and military as part of the state that is suppressing my interests. I have to confront them. So, and another issue is to also make sure the police are properly resourced. I like what Dr. Jones said. We must resource the police. See, do they have cameras? Ghana police, when they are walking around, do they have body cameras? They don't have it. Do they have what you call radios with them individually? They don't have it. So even the police itself, the way we have trained them and provided resources to them, make their way more difficult. Because I work with the private security company here.
All right.
That private security company, its officers are properly uniformed. They have radio, they have cameras. When they have problem, there's a yellow button on their radio that they just press. And everywhere, any officer in that area will be alert. And then they will come and support. But Ghana, the police officers do not have it. You see them as, excuse me to say, somebody coming from farm, not properly dressed, in tatters, the boots are not well. So that is also a kind of thing when citizens see the police in tattered clothes, not properly uniformed. They see them as, okay, these people will look at them. They don't even respect them. So we need to resource the police, train them well, give them the resources, and then let them live within the communities.
All right.
Let them live within the community. The police must be friendly. Here in England, I can see a police officer shake his hand, ask me, how are you doing? He will respond, we have about 5 minutes chat and I go my way. But in Ghana, you see a police officer, it is even difficult for people to chat with them. We must change the model, and that will also help Ghana to develop, I would say.
Thank you very much. I think our time is far spent, but I'll read one question from the audience here on Zoom and then another from Facebook. And then I'll ask you a quick follow-up question. So the one from Facebook, AK Mensa, directed to Dr. Jones, says, how do we upskill those community groups and strengthen their activities to dealing with insecurity and brutalities by the police, military, either in politics or governance of natural resources? Please keep it short for us in a minute or two, Dr. Jones. Dr. Pokwa.
So if I understand, he's trying to talk about groupings at a community level. I mean, sometimes in criminology, we refer to them as vigilantes. You know, for me, the kind of practice we have in this country over the years and the kind of experiences we have over the years, I mean, it makes, you know, strengthening the use of such kind of community groups a bit skeptical, you know, because, you know, with time, if you don't take care, because they are always subjected to, there's always a propensity for them to abuse the kind of, powers we give them. They also tend to become more like a paramilitary or some police, group, you know, sometimes tormenting people and also even providing security for politicians and all that. So whilst it is important that we leverage on these social groups at the community level, especially for, you know, policing rural crimes, for instance, you know, I think that at the community level, at the city level, we have to do more in terms of resourcing the police instead. I mean, that's my personal view about how these community groups evolve. So based on the studies I've done about the use of these community groups, I think that at a city level, I mean, I prefer to use the police, resource the police, and let them get to work, and then we can use those groups probably at the rural level where there's limited policing resources. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. And then this has no specific direction, but I will direct it to Akosia. One from Martin here on Zoom says, if the poor and buga works of the security services benefit the politicians, how can we decouple or minimize the influence politicians have on these kinds of strategies that have been used? He goes on to also says that, but sometimes when security services become too familiar, citizens tend not to take them serious. It looks cultural in the case of Ghana. But back to the first one, how do we minimize the influence that politicians have on some of these things that do happen? Akosia.
Interest of time, I think that we sort of already sort of alluded to it. Part of it is historical. Part of it is the model with which they work, right? So those kinds of models in the past, as Edmund had already stated, there's been many commissions, and apparently there's been commissions since 1951, I believe. However, I heard that mostly they're not implemented. And why? Because of political will, right? So because of the politicians, first of all, to change the model, it's going to take the politicians to change it, because it's going to take parliament to change the law. Somebody has to have the will to sort of bring it together. What's the change looking like? But I'm even surprised that they haven't even introduced it to even change the law, right? So the same with these people. So it doesn't, if you flip it, it's the opposition, they come into power, the police is protecting them. So there's no will to change the model, to change the law. So it's historical, it's the model, the law, and the training. So they all go together. And even the police, the composition of the police council, because here, if an officer harms a civilian, automatically it goes to an internal civilian-based investigative team that looks into it. When the police officer harms somebody, it's not going to be the police force investigating it. It has to be an independent setup group, I've got the name, that actually investigates it. Whereby in Ghana, the police council, as I mentioned, the head of it is somebody appointed by the president, by the minister, and it goes on and on. So again, you're saying, how does it become depoliticized? I think it's gonna take, but then the people are not even aware of this to be able to push for it. In Ghana, I think when they're having election, all people me bottom or whatever, like the money they want to get here and now. So they don't really think past their bottom, right? Instead of looking at the issues and bringing it to the politicians as to who is going to have the policy to address it, it's all about who attended my funeral. So the people themselves are disconnected in terms of what is actually needed in politics. So in general, to be advocating to bring those changes, to sort of join up with some civil society groups to actually effect those changes and bring it to force the politician to incorporate it and change the law, change the model with which the police actually operate. That's what it's gonna take. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Akosia. And
maybe I have just one follow-up for Jones, because you seem to know the structure of the policing system in Ghana. Maybe from what Akosia said, do we have structures in place for redress if I get abused or if I get sort of brutalized by police? I mean, at the local level, or is it only the police council sitting somewhere in Accra? Is it also part of the reason why police do this with impunity, because they know there is no accountability and responsibility?
Great. I thank you very much, because when Akosia was speaking, I wanted to chip in that kind of thing. You know, there is something we call reciprocal obligations that exist among these institutions, especially the military and the police and even the universities. Okay, what happens is that when a crime is committed by people within these institutions, the onus fall on the same institution in redressing those kind of issues. So you will see that because that kind of reciprocal obligation is limited to those organizations, people who misbehave within the security agencies, where the police and the military in particular, are not really subjected to the civil laws of the country. So most of the time, in the military setup, for instance, they will constitute what we call a tribunal, or maybe a court martial, okay, where they will sit down and then, present the cases before those court martial, and then they will exert certain punishment. Sometimes this punishment is just about putting them in guard rooms for maybe 30 days. So if you look at what happened in Tamale recently, you will see that the soldiers that went on beating people within the streets were only subjected to court martial. They were sentenced to just 30 days. Some had just their rank reduced. But you see, in cases where people lose their lives, I am thinking that we have to shed off that reciprocal obligation for those institutions and then subject the very individuals or perpetrators to the civil laws of the country. In that case, each and every member of, for instance, our security agencies will now begin to realize that apart from the fact that they are working for the state, they also have individual responsibilities to exercise maximum discretion in terms of in dealing with the citizens, and also making sure that they don't exercise arbitrarily the powers that the Constitution has conferred on them. So I think that basically that is the structure that we have, and for me it is quite problematic. It doesn't afford accountability.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. John Sopokuware. So I think that time is really, really fast spent, and I'll just take your concluding remark. But I would want you to do this for me because of one thing that Lord said, that if we are able to develop the country, provide the various infrastructural needs of the people or the social amenities, perhaps some of these protests and demonstrations will not occur. Well, I respectfully disagree a bit because I think in the advanced countries still we see protests, we see demonstrations going on. And I think that we've said a lot with regard to how the security services could work very well, adopt the best approach to make sure that they do not brutalize the crowds when they are on protest and demonstrations. So in your concluding remark, I know Akosua mentioned a few of them, but what do you say also to the citizens as they embark on protests and demonstrations? Because I think we're going to embark on these protests and demonstrations, I don't know, count them. So what's your concluding remark to the Ghanaian citizen listening? How should they also organize themselves? What are some of the things they should do? Please, in just a minute or two. So I'll begin with you, Lord. What do you say to the Ghanaian citizen? What should they do when they are embarking on these demonstrations and protests, even as the country is being developed?
I would say that they should respect the law. But unfortunately, most Ghanaians do not know the law because NCC, which is National Civic Education, they've not been doing a good job in educating Ghanaians about their rights and their duties and responsibilities. So when they are going on demonstration, people just go and then whatever they think they should do, they do it. So people must be educated concerning their duties, responsibilities, rights, and everything. Then also, as a citizen, if I'm going on demonstration, I should know the reason why I'm going. If I don't know why people are gathering, I shouldn't get myself involved because that may also lead to something else. So, for instance, like the demonstration that people had in Nigeria, people went there because they said that somebody had been killed. Okay, the person that has been killed, is the demonstration the only solution or the only option that you have? No. So people must also be taught various ways of addressing issues, not only in demonstration, not only in using violence, but by also adopting methods that are going to the community. For instance, they have a chief. There's this guy who has been who has killed.
Thank you very much, Lord. I'm so sorry, but point well made. And Akosua, in a minute, what would you say to the Ghanaian citizen out there in terms of embarking on demonstrations, protests? What do you expect them to do? Yeah, go ahead, please.
No, I'd like to finish. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm done. I asked a general question.
So what do I say? The same question you asked, what are the responsibilities? I think that I would agree with Lord that the majority of the Ghanaians, including even the educated people, are quite ignorant about the law. The fact is, human right is granted by the state. It's the state that grants you the right. Yes, you're born, and there's some, and I know that AK may pick on it, but that's another topic altogether. The reason being the holders of a right are the states. So unfortunately, it's the state that grants you the right, it's the state that provides the right for you to demonstrate. And so it is almost like a codependency. So you just can't get up and say, that's my right, that's my right. Yes, that's your right, but the state has a negative, and then they have a positive obligation to provide you with the things you need. Therefore, the people must understand that the right don't come from the sky. Therefore, you need to work with the state in tandem. And so in general, the citizens have to be educated. They all, if, for example, you wanted to demonstrate and the police said today you cannot demonstrate, it is more proper to negotiate and find out why and find out the parameters as to how to control the group, because group controls or grouping can actually get out of hand because there is something called group thinking. Once people are in a group, they can easily do wrong because once you're in a group, you lose that individual responsibility and people can misbehave very easily. And that is why sometimes they need the police to actually give them the permit to control, because people could have drunk alcohol, drugs, criminals can mix up. The police has equal responsibility, not just to protect the protesters, but to protect other civilians, protect the community. And so the people must learn all of these. They also must know that there is a complaint procedure within the police system where they can complain, or through their human rights, their SHRAG people. So they must know all of this. And I think the government has the responsibility to also incorporate this in the educational system. And
all right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Akosia, because of our time. Dr. Jones, in one phrase, please. What would be your advice? Also, we've said a lot, and we've given a lot of suggestions to the government. What about the citizenry as well?
Yes, I think going forward, we the citizens must share this, our mob mentality. You know, it is something that is so consistent with Ghanaians, the way we love to act in a mob. Okay, we sometimes think that the best way for us to demonstrate and to be seen to have demonstrated is to go on rampage and destroy property. Look, once we begin to have that mob mentality and to perpetrate it, the police will always come at us with a warrior mentality. And you should know that once they come out with this warrior mentality, definitely are going to be casualties. So it is very important that in a group setting where there is a gathering, we try to express our grievances and our frustrations in a very peaceful manner, okay, without going on rampage and without destroying properties. So that at least the police, we can also try to, you know, negotiate our way out with the police in such situations. So for me, it all has to do with education, shedding our mob mentality, and I think we should be fine with the police.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Jones Opoku-Ware. So Akosia just shared the document she was talking about, the police, the people, the politics, police accountability in Ghana 2007. So thank you very much, Lord Eduse. Thank you very much, Akosia Jima. Thank you very much, Jones Opoku-Ware. And of course, Edmond, thank you also for making time with us. And to our fellow Sub-Syrians who joined via Facebook, thank you for making time. And those of you also joined the discussion here on Zoom, thank you very much for making time with us. I am Evans Apia Kisi, and today I hosted the show with Edmond Yeboah. And next week, we'll bring you another interesting discussion. Have a lovely day, evening, afternoon, wherever you are. Catch you another time. Bye-bye.